Welcome to History Channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. George Lincoln Rockwell, leader of the American Nazi Party, attended a black Muslim meeting in Washington, D.C. in 1960, symbolizing a strange and tense overlap of extremist ideologies during a turbulent decade in American history, where hate and racial struggle found themselves crossing paths under the same roof, if only for a moment. During the Los Angeles riots of May 1992, a U.S. Marine stood guard outside a supermarket in Compton, surrounded by chaos and smoke as citizens looted and fires burned. It was a moment when order met despair, reflecting the deep fracture between communities and the authorities sworn to protect them. In 1927, French racing driver Robert Benoist posed proudly beside his Delege 1500, a symbol of speed, engineering, and daring. His calm composure contrasted the roaring danger of the track, embodying an era when motorsport was as much about courage as it was about machines. This 1928 mugshot of Faye Watson shows a young woman fined 10 pounds for cocaine possession, part of Sydney's Roaring Twenties archive of female offenders. Her calm gaze defied shame, capturing a brief glimpse into a decade when freedom, fashion, and vice danced hand in hand beneath the city's nightlife. Pancho Villa and Emiliano Zapata stood together at Mexico City's National Palace in December 1914, uniting two revolutionary forces against a corrupt regime. Their handshake symbolized a fleeting moment of solidarity before power struggles divided them, forever immortalized as heroes and legends of Mexico's turbulent revolution. In Sarajevo, 1941, a Muslim woman gently covered the yellow star of her Jewish neighbor with her veil, risking her own safety. In a world consumed by hatred, that single act of compassion became a timeless symbol of humanity defying cruelty, even in the darkest years of war. A Romanian soldier raised a victory sign in 1989 after removing the communist insignia from his cap. It was a gesture of liberation and pride, marking the fall of a dictatorship that had silenced millions. For that brief moment, hope stood taller than fear, and freedom felt possible again. A young student protester flashed the V sign before a line of Chinese soldiers in Tiananmen Square on June 1, 1989. Behind the simple gesture lay courage, defiance, and tragedy. Within days, the same square would fall silent under the weight of tanks and unspoken grief. In 1996, Las Vegas police surrounded boxer Mike Tyson moments after he bit Evander Holyfield's ear in the ring. Shock rippled through the sports world as chaos replaced glory. What began as a championship match ended as one of boxing's most infamous nights in modern memory. The Undertaker peered down from above as medical staff rushed to Mankind, who had just fallen 16 feet through the Hell in a Cell structure in June 1998. What was meant as entertainment became real horror, blurring the line between scripted spectacle and human endurance. Captured German soldiers marched through Moscow in July 1944 in what was called the Parade of the Defeated. The streets echoed with silence and humiliation, as thousands of prisoners walked beneath the eyes of their conquerors, marking a symbolic reversal of power in the heart of war-torn Europe. In September 1914, a French boy approached Indian soldiers newly arrived in Marseille to fight alongside the Allies. His innocent curiosity bridged worlds apart, capturing a rare moment of warmth amid the early days of a global war that would soon consume millions of lives. On September 7, 1945, Soviet IS-3 heavy tanks rolled through Berlin's victory parade, revealing their power to the world for the first time. Sleek, angular, and imposing, they marked a new era of post-war might, a silent message of strength from a nation emerging from immense sacrifice. 17-year-old Maria Ginesta stood on a Barcelona rooftop in 1937, rifle in hand and hope in her eyes. She embodied the youthful spirit of the Spanish Civil War, a symbol of resistance, courage, and tragedy in a conflict that tore a nation apart before her dreams could take root. A teenage Bosnian fighter paused for a cigarette near Guka Gora in 1993, his eyes distant after a firefight. The smoke curled around him like the fog of war itself, capturing the loss of innocence and exhaustion of a generation thrust into a brutal, senseless conflict. On the first day of school in Beslan, September 2004, classmates posed for a photo that would later haunt the world. None of the children survived the terrorist siege that followed. Their smiling faces became a devastating reminder of innocence stolen by violence and fear. In August 1944, Polish civilians gathered in silence during the exhumation at Majdanek extermination camp. The earth gave up its dead, and grief filled the air. Faces once numb with occupation now reflected disbelief at the scale of horror unearthed from their own soil. In 1973 Shanghai, women workers carefully bound printed materials in a busy factory. Their steady hands moved with precision, part of a vast industrial machine driving China's modernization. The scene reflected the discipline and quiet strength that defined a generation of workers reshaping their country's future. Jiang Zuliang, once China's last great warlord, sat with his wife in Hawaii in the 1990s, frail but dignified. Decades earlier, he had kidnapped Chiang Kai-shek to force unity against Japan. For that act, he spent over 50 years imprisoned, dying at 100, a man both punished and remembered. On June 22, 1941, German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop read the declaration of war against the Soviet Union. It marked the start of Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history. As words became war, millions would soon be swept into a conflict of unimaginable scale and suffering. In the 1980s, a Soviet convoy rolled through Afghanistan as soldiers waved from a BTR to two children on a donkey. The brief exchange smiles amid destruction captured the strange duality of war, where humanity flickered between occupation and survival, even on dusty, hostile roads. In 1983, U.S. President Ronald Reagan met Afghan Mujahideen in the Oval Office, calling them freedom fighters. The photograph symbolized Cold War alliances built on mutual enemies, alliances that would later cast long shadows across global politics and redefine the balance between support and consequence. On June 26, 1971, Philippe Petit walked a tightrope across the towers of Notre Dame, high above Paris. He balanced with grace and defiance. The act blended art and danger, transforming fear into beauty as the crowd below held its breath in awe and disbelief. In 1963, workers climbed across the vast frame of the Arecibo telescope to install its massive reflector panels. Each movement was precise, each risk immense. The project, hidden deep in Puerto Rico's hills, would soon become one of humanity's greatest tools for exploring the universe. On August 5, 1948, the Royal Inniskilling Fusiliers arrived in Singapore at the dawn of the Malayan insurgency. Their disciplined march marked the beginning of a long and complex campaign against communist guerrillas in the tropics. a shadow war fought in jungles far from home. In Moscow, 1990, a biker gang roared through underground tunnels late at night, beer in hand and rebellion in spirit. It was a chaotic reflection of post-Soviet freedom, lawless, raw, and thrilling, where young Russians tested the limits of their newfound independence beneath the sleeping city. Crowds lined the streets of London on September 6, 1997, as Princess Diana's funeral procession passed by. Silence hung heavy as millions mourned the people's princess, whose compassion had transcended royalty. Her final journey became one of the most emotional moments in modern British history. In March 1949, tourists stood before a wingless Japanese plane near Canton, a relic of recent war. The silent shell of the aircraft symbolized a fallen empire, its defeated wings resting as witnesses to the cost of ambition and the fragile peace that followed. On March 1, 1923, the U.S. fleet waited patiently to cross the Panama Canal, engines idle beneath tropical skies. The scene captured American naval might and logistical mastery, as steel giants prepared to move between oceans, bridging two worlds through human engineering and ambition. In the 1990s, a Ghanaian soldier stood guard at Monrovia's port as part of the Icamog peacekeeping force. His stance was calm but weary, representing the hope of regional unity amid Liberia's chaos. Through dust and danger, his presence spoke of courage and uncertain peace. In Vienna during the 1970s, road construction turned daily travel into chaos. Commuters faced endless delays and dust as modernization reshaped the city's old streets. It was a time of progress mixed with frustration, when patience became as essential as fuel for anyone trying to move through the capital. In 1974, protesters filled the streets of Lisbon during the Carnation Revolution. Soldiers and civilians marched together, holding red carnations in their rifles instead of bullets. Without bloodshed, Portugal's long dictatorship fell, and democracy was reborn in one of Europe's most peaceful revolutions of the century. In December 1991, Croatian soldiers gathered around burning Yugoslav flags as war consumed their homeland. The flames symbolized both independence and loss, marking the collapse of a nation once united by ideology but divided by identity. The smoke rose over a region that would not heal for years. In 1933, Blanche Barrow, wife of Buck Barrow and member of the infamous Barrow Gang, was captured by police. Exhausted and wounded, she faced the end of her life on the run with Bonnie and Clyde. Her arrest marked another step toward the fall of the Depression-era outlaws. In 1906, American racer Fred Marriott posed beside the Stanley rocket at Ormond Beach, Florida. Built for speed and powered by steam, it broke land speed records and captured the imagination of a world fascinated by machines. The sleek car became a symbol of early 20th century innovation and danger. In 1942, a New Zealand coast watcher stood alone in the remote Auckland Islands, scanning the sea for enemy ships. Cut off from civilization, these watchers were the silent eyes of the Pacific War, enduring isolation and storms to provide vital intelligence that protected Allied forces from unseen threats. In 1972, one of the Palestinian gunmen involved in the Munich Olympic massacre stood on a balcony, surrounded by chaos and cameras. 11 Israeli athletes were already dead. The image captured the chilling collision of politics and sport, forever marking the Games as a moment of terror and sorrow. Around 1890, Welsh strongwoman Miriam Kate Williams, known as Valcana, posed proudly in her show attire. With unmatched strength and long flowing hair, she defied Victorian expectations of femininity. Her performances astonished audiences across Europe, proving that power and grace could coexist in a single fearless woman. In 1954, Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie appeared on NBC's Youth Wants to Know in Washington. Calm and dignified, he answered questions about leadership and peace, representing Africa's voice on the world stage. His presence highlighted the growing role of non-Western nations in post-war international dialogue. By 1979, New York City streets were covered in grime and graffiti, reflecting a decade of urban decline. Crime rates soared and public confidence fell. Yet beneath the decay, art and rebellion flourished, as the city's rough edges gave rise to one of the most creative eras in its history. In 1945, the royal family of Iran, led by Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, posed for an official portrait. The young monarch stood at the height of his early reign, embodying both the promise of modernization and the shadow of political unrest that would later shape Iran's turbulent path. In 1914, the kings of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark met in Malmö to declare neutrality at the outbreak of World War I. Their unity preserved peace in Scandinavia while Europe descended into chaos, proving that diplomacy could triumph where armies could not, at least for a time. At Kleinscheidegg Station in the Bernese Oberland in 1971, trains rested beneath the shadow of the Eiger. Tourists admired the snow-covered peaks while workers managed the rails with precision. It was a serene meeting point between nature's grandeur and the steady rhythm of Swiss engineering. On September 5, 1975, Lynette Squeaky Fromm, a member of the Manson family, aimed a pistol at President Gerald Ford in Sacramento. The gun jammed, and she was subdued instantly. The failed assassination attempt became a haunting reminder of America's turbulent, post-1960s counterculture and its lingering extremism. In December 1981, under martial law in Poland, a Warsaw cinema displayed the film Apocalypse Now. Outside, curfews and soldiers ruled the streets. Inside, audiences watched a story of war and madness, the screen reflecting the tense reality of a nation caught in its own political struggle. In 1971, Sudeten Germans marched with banners reading Scheel and Brandt giving away our land, protesting West Germany's Ostpolitik policy. Their anger reflected decades of displacement and unresolved identity after World War II. The demonstration revealed how history's wounds continued to shape Europe's borders and emotions. In 1922, British pilots of 203 Squadron watched as mechanics serviced a Nieuport Nightjar fighter in Gallipoli. The war was over, but the region remained unstable. The scene captured the quiet professionalism of an Air Force maintaining order in the twilight of the British Empire's global reach. The USS Shenandoah's control gondola in 1923 showed Commander McCrary at the helm, focused amid a maze of instruments. The rigid airship represented America's ambition to master flight beyond airplanes. Its later tragic crash would end that dream. But this moment preserved the optimism of early aviation pioneers. Around 1990, students from the Tomsk Military Medical Institute trained in Siberia's frozen fields. Dressed in heavy uniforms, they learned to treat wounds in harsh conditions, preparing for the realities of military medicine. Their discipline reflected the Soviet emphasis on readiness and endurance, even as the system neared its end. In 1972 Marseille, street painters worked amid heavy traffic, turning sidewalks into open-air galleries. Cars roared past as colors bloomed on canvas and stone. The fusion of art and everyday life gave the old port city a pulse of energy, celebrating creativity in the midst of urban chaos.